This time of year is prime time for a lot of people to be buying a house or moving in general. So we thought it'd be a perfect time to put together 7 tips to hopefully save you on that enormous purchase.
We actually decided to break this video up into two parts because of the length of content and detail we went into. This first video gives great tips for anyone looking in the housing market and is what we actually consider the minimum of what you should be implementing to get the best deal you can. The next video will be a bit more advanced, but possesses an even greater opportunity for savings.
Stop wasting money on that dumb shit and instead put it in investment. I know it's tempting. You'll spend it and be broke again.
Welcome back, guys. I'm your bro Taylor.
And I'm your bro Ryan.
And we're going to be diving into some real numbers here and giving you some real helpful tips, some things that we've implemented ourselves when we've been looking into buying real estate that'll hopefully save you tens, possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars. So recently, the market has begun to shift. I don't know if you've been able to tell just because it's slowed down so much, but now there is such a discrepancy between the number of buyers and sellers. In fact, there are nearly 500,000 more home sellers than buyers as of May 2025, one of the larger gaps we've seen in recent history. And of course, with an imbalance like this, home prices are expected to drop about 1% year over year by the end of 2025. Now, that obviously presents a great opportunity. We can't guarantee that. No one can really tell you exactly what will happen in the housing market. If they're making that claim, that's just a random claim they're making. No one knows this future for certain. But again, this is just a time you should really be diving back into those numbers.
Now, tip number one is going to be pre-purchase research. If you can understand your area you want to live in, the cost of living, the neighborhoods you like, the school district, all of that, you can really understand and find nooks and crannies where, oh, wow, that's a really great deal, or, oh, wow, that's way overpriced.
Yeah.
But if you don't do that research ahead of time and you're just scrolling Zillow or Redfin and you say, oh, I think I can afford a $500,000 home, Zillow says I can probably afford a $500,000, you might be way overpaying because you have no idea the cost in that area.
Now, a lot of these little market analysis tips we're going to give you are kind of general rules of thumb. There are always exceptions to almost every rule, but one of the bigger ones and the more obvious ones is just simply looking at how long the house has been on the market. Those days on market can be a real storyteller. I mean, if it's been on for a couple days, you don't have quite the negotiating power as if it's been on for a few months. At that point, the seller might be a little bit more antsy, like, oh, why am I not getting these offers? I'm kind of at the point where I need to take anything. And at that point, you have a lot more power. So at 30 days, people are like, 60 days in, they're really starting to stress. By the time you reach probably 3 months in, a lot of times sellers are like, okay, I just have to get this house off my hands. Now, there are exceptions. Some people, they'll have it listed for a year and never change the price because they just simply don't care and they have the means and money to be able to hold that property. In that case, you're out of luck on that one. But in general, good tip.
And going right along with that is pay attention to the trend in price reduction. So if it's sat for 30 days and then 60 days and then 90 days and the price never changed, like Taylor said, they're probably not too open to changing or negotiating the price, or who knows, maybe they can't. They're so in over their head, they just can't sell it for any less to pay back the loan they owe. So I've run into the situation where I've offered and they couldn't go any lower, couldn't negotiate at all, but you don't find that out necessarily until you make that offer. So it's always good to try or ask questions. But typically, if you look, you'll see around the 15-day mark, they'll drop it maybe a little bit. 30-day mark, they'll drop it a little bit. If they're 60, 90 days in, they'll start doing larger and larger drops. And you can see that trend. They're getting a little bit more eager to sell it. And a lot of people maybe move to another state, another city, and they're like, I just want done with this. I don't have to worry about this. I'm in my new place. I'm in my new job. I don't want to pay attention to that anymore. Let's just get rid of it. And they're willing to take a little bit more of a hit.
And this one probably goes without saying, but just kind of noting the overall property condition. And you can kind of make note of this before you even get to tour the home in person, making note of kind of what you see in the pictures. If you see some discoloration on the ceilings and walls, like, oh, that might be water damage. Yeah. Or on one of the exterior pictures, you see a crack in the foundation. Or you go to the street view, which I always do, and you go around, you're like, oof, the street and the properties around it aren't well kept. Some of them look abandoned. Maybe this isn't the best spot. Having that knowledge gives you a lot of leverage in the sense of, well, they don't really keep up with it. Like if it's overgrown and everything, they're probably not even in the house anymore. All these little bits and pieces get you better insight into how to make a better deal. Of course, me personally, I like to kind of fish for information from the listing agent. Like, oh, is it being rented right now? And oftentimes they'll reveal whether it's being rented out right now or it's owner occupied. And general rule of thumb, if something's being rented, chances are, it's not quite as upkept as if the owner was there, because renters just naturally care a little bit less. I mean, that's just human nature.
Now that you've kind of done that pre-research, that surface level research, maybe you found a neighborhood that you're like, wow, there's a lot of good priced homes in a city or area I really like. That's interesting. Like, let me dive a little bit more into that and see if
Mm-hmm.
this is really high or really low price. But I won't know that until I dive into the numbers. So, section two, or tip number two we got for you, is going to be a comparative market analysis, or you can run your own comps. This is typically what your real estate agent will do for you if you already have one, and if you're already shopping. But if you're not to that level yet, you're just figuring out, can I afford this area? You
Yeah.
can definitely do that on your own. First, we'll go into a surface level type information right here in this video, but we do have detailed videos on how you can run this yourself by the property address and the matching the bedrooms and bathroom, and like going really deep into it so you can find out, is this property overpriced or not? And please go check out that video. Let us know what you think. But going into this, just a little bit of information about it. So for the most part, you want to match the specs. You want to try and find a bedroom that's very similar. So 3 bedroom, 3 bedroom. You don't want to compare a 1 bedroom property to a 4 bedroom property. You want to match the bathrooms as best you can. You want to match the square footage the best you can. Everything you possibly can match down. If you can find say 5 houses that have the same bedroom,
Mm.
bathroom, square foot, lot size, age, built, and everything, you are
Oh,
going to have a fantastic idea of what that property is actually worth. But that becomes very difficult because you don't have too many houses that are the exact same. So that's where you're making an analysis. You're extrapolating to get an idea what this value is.
mm-hmm.
And so basically, you're just going to compare all of those things and only look at sales or pending sales within the last 3 to 6 months if possible. If there's nothing for whatever reason, there's nothing close to you, then you're going to want to go out a little bit more. And then you're also going to keep it as close as you can. So if
Yeah.
you can find a ton of properties that sold within 3 months, within half a mile, you're going to have a really good idea, again, of what that property's worth. But some in rural areas, that's not
Mm-hmm.
possible. In the mountains, that's not usually possible. You'll have to go out maybe a few miles or something to get any
Yeah.
idea. But that's a good way to figure out. And basically, if you can't find much and you say, property I'm looking at is 4 bedroom, this one's 3 bedroom, then you're just going to want to give it a little bit extra value. So this
Yeah.
one sold for 300, maybe yours is worth 325.
And keep in mind, guys, one of the most important factors is simply distance to your property. Now, an appraiser is going to value something that sold next door with maybe an extra bathroom way more than it will a neighborhood over that has the exact same specs. He's going to look at the next door neighbor way before that other one. So location is super crucial. You hear that all the time in real estate: location, location, location. For running a comp, that is certainly the case. And of course, a lot of this depends on what kind of market we're in. Right now, it's really cooling down. A couple years ago, houses were selling for well over asking. So, kind of knowing where the market sits at the moment can be like, okay, well, this house is probably going to sell for closer to 90% of asking versus a couple years ago when things were selling for 105, 110, 130% of the asking value. So, having that in the back of your mind can also be a helpful thing. Now that you've ran those numbers, let's get into some that directly affect how you're going to save on this house. One is simply asking about credits versus simply a price reduction. There's a big difference here. If you ask for a seller credit that helps you with your closing costs and everything, you need less upfront money. And in certain conditions, let's say you're able to buy down your rate, it also saves you in the monthly. So, but let's give an example of that. Let's say there's a $400,000 house and you offer, say, 405 with a $10,000 credit. Now, the seller basically can view that as a $395,000 offer. But for you, you now need $10,000 less to pay towards closing. That's a big thing that's holding a lot of people back, is simply being able to afford the down payment and closing costs. So boom, right there is a huge difference for you, because you coming in at 405 doesn't really affect your monthly that much. But obviously $10,000 off rip is a huge thing.
Yeah, like Taylor said, sometimes the down payment is the problem, but
Hmm.
alternatively, sometimes the debt to income, so you have car loans, you have credit card, whatever else, so your debt to how much you make is too high and the bank won't loan you the money. So being able to use that credit to buy down the interest rate, that might sound too complicated. Ask your realtor. This is just general information and tips. If you don't know and you get to the home buying process, just say, hey, I heard about this buying down rate thing. What's that all about? And they'll give you all the nitty gritty. But basically, you can buy down or pay money up front to make your interest rate for however long you pay off your mortgage a little bit less. So each point costs 1% of the loan. A point is equivalent to 0.25% of the interest rate. 0.25% interest does not sound like much at all, to be honest, but on a $300,000 loan, which is honestly a pretty cheap house these days,
Yeah.
is $50 to $150 a month cheaper. So that's kind of nice. And if
Yeah.
you're able to use it, get a bigger seller's credit, or you use the seller's credit plus your own cash, however you want to do it, you can pay down that interest rate a little bit to help how much you would owe each month, which then could help you qualify for the mortgage. I know that sounds really cool, like, and a great idea. Oh yeah, I'd love to save that money, just buying down the points. We're making it sound easier than it is, to be honest, because it is very expensive to do that. But definitely look into it. Ask questions. Feel free to always ask questions to us and to others, the professionals in the field.
Yeah.
But let's say you did that. You found the house. You ran the numbers. Now you've made the offer and you've got your offer accepted. Now what are we doing? We're getting an inspection done. There's usually a general inspection, but maybe if it's not too expensive or there's a slight problem, you call out an electrician, you call out a plumber, anything like that. Anything that concerns you slightly, call out, because you're making the biggest purchase of your life. So another $500 sounds crazy, sounds scary, but it can be worth it if they're like, oh yeah, there's tree roots growing all through your plumbing, everything need to be replaced. That's something to know, because that's going to cost you thousands, not 500. There's almost no situation that I would go into and completely remove the inspection. That's just you're asking for problems because you don't know anything. You're just diving in and saying, I'll fix it when it comes up. So that's a little scary.
That's just not the market we're in anymore. Maybe a couple years ago when you were getting outbid like crazy, you would have to throw in something crazy like that, but it's just not in your best interest. Like Ryan said, these inspections save you so much money. At the minimum, you should have at least one good contractor or inspection specialist come out and take a look, because this really gives you a lot of leverage when you come to negotiate and maybe ask for additional seller's credits. We would recommend that oftentimes. Now that you've kind of got the offer accepted, they kind of have an interest to obviously sell the home, so they're more inclined to actually accept additional contingencies. You're like, we did an inspection, the plumbing, like Ryan said, bad. You can either say, well, we'd like you to fix that before we close, or you give me a credit towards it. So really up to you. And even if the inspection doesn't come back with anything drastic, it's just little things here like, there's some chipping paint, there's little chips on the windows here and there. Just kind of lump that all together, be like, look, there's little things here and there. And it kind of just added up. We want this. You don't have to have specific things, although the seller obviously reserves the right to ask, okay, why are you asking for this? So it is better to actually have legitimate reasons.
And think about, once you get your offer accepted, you almost have more power in that case, because they do not want to go back to the market and say, look, I know everybody went away from our house because it was under contract. You assumed we would sell it, but something happened and it didn't. One, that turns a lot of people away because, what happened? Why does this keep going back on the market?
100%.
And two, now they have to hold it even longer, start the process all over again, do more open houses. So you really have more power. They don't want to do that. So you can ask for a little bit more money, or you're in that negotiation cycle where you can just go back and forth. It's okay to ask for a lot and them to come and meet you in the middle.
Yeah. And let's say in the very beginning you didn't ask for a credit and your plan all along was to ask a credit once you got your offer accepted. That's perfectly acceptable. For me personally, when I first offered on the house that I own now, I asked for a few $1,000s towards closing and everything. But then when I did inspection, things did pop up. I had the seller actually repair a couple of things and give me an additional credit because I had legit reasons and pictures of these things. I'm like, this is a concern for me. And so they were more than willing to meet those demands. Now, all those tips are great, but they mean absolutely nothing if your offer never gets accepted. So in this fifth section right here, fifth tip, we're going to give you some pointers that are very easy, no real cost to you, to better make your offer more enticing to that seller. One, you can make some seller-friendly concessions. It doesn't always have to be money. You can agree to use their preferred closing company. Be flexible as far as closing timeline. If the seller wants it a little bit sooner versus a little bit later, be willing to work with them.
Yeah, recently we were purchasing a property and we went to the seller and we made an offer and they said they really liked it, but one of the things they would love to do is stay in or own the property for a month longer. So realistically, with closing and inspection and all of that, 1 month plus a month after that. Once we came to terms, they wanted an extra month because they really wanted to use the property. It was their secondary property. It wasn't somewhere they lived primarily. So they wanted to go back and use it once or twice. And we said, yeah, we're in no huge rush to get it in our hands. So absolutely. And that was one thing that strengthened our offer, is we were willing to let them stay in it.
Yeah. On top of that, you can remove unnecessary contingencies. Again, we'd prefer that you keep that inspection. You can shorten the inspection period if you've got like, oh, I know my contractor will be out tomorrow. Then be willing to shorten that if that's something that you can afford to do. Also, you can write a personal letter expressing your genuine interest. This usually will work better if it's an owner actually selling their home. It's if a real estate investor, they've kind of been in this game for a while. Or if, they don't live in the home, it might be harder to track them down and get them a letter. But oftentimes, there's families that are selling this, and if they think that you're like someone who will genuinely take care of their home, a lot of times that sentimental value does play a factor. Now, I'm not saying try and manipulate anyone or take advantage of someone like, oh, this old lady, I bet I can play on her heartstrings and get her to take off 30 grand.
You thought about this.
I mean, it crosses people's mind, I have no doubt. But we're not saying do that. But if you are genuinely interested, like you're ready to oh, this is going to be my home where I start building a family and everything, you can tell people that. I know people that do that all the time, and it actually does work. Now, on the flip side, we do want to kind of steer you away from a couple things you may have heard from in the past. Maybe they were necessary a couple years ago, but in today's market, it's just really not. Don't offer a ton of excess earnest money. You don't really need to be throwing up $5,000, $10,000 to show you're a legit buyer. Right now, there just aren't that many buyers in the market. So these little things that maybe my offer will stick out that much more. If it's costing you or risking you any money, at this point in the game, we wouldn't really recommend it. So like we said earlier, don't throw away certain contingencies like your inspection. Don't go with an unrealistic closing timeline that really stresses you and makes you run around a lot. It's just not really necessary and not in your best interest.
A lot of times people get nervous and you're making one of the largest purchases of your life. And so you want to over contingency and put a lot of clauses in your, if this happens, I'm able to get out with no cost. If that happens, if we notice mold in one spot, like everything's canceled. Like if you do too many of those things, the seller's going to get nervous and they're not going to want to play ball because they're just like, okay, they're going to make it so hard for me to sell this home and it's going to drag out for a long time, so many negotiations and yada, yada. And I don't necessarily want to do that. So again, we're by no means saying cancel your inspection. Definitely have that. Definitely get multiple inspections if you think it's necessary. But at the same time, don't add every little nook and cranny, every little thing that if any scenario happens, we're out. Just don't do that. Again, talk to the professionals, talk to the realtor, talk to the people that are licensed, and go through it together and say, hey, I'm actually concerned about mold in this area. Is that super common? Should we add a clause about that? And they'll give you all the necessary info. Oh yeah, I do it all the time. Or no, that's not really a thing of concern in this area. So that's good information to have. Again, lean on the professionals. It's the best thing you can do.
Now, I know this has been a long video, but you implement even one of these tips and save a couple $1,000s, I say it's 100% worth it.
Oh yeah.
Every dollar counts. So again, these are super beneficial to anyone at any stage in the home buying process.
So thank you guys so much for sticking to the end of this video because I know every single one of you did. So please leave a comment that you stayed to the end. And always, always don't forget to like this video, share with a friend, subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for next week's video.
Stop wasting money on that dumb shit and instead put it in investment. I know it's tempting, you'll spend it and be broke again.